Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, I'm going to try and give you some perspective historically around the league this year on where the Philadelphia Phillies stretch of really rough play actually puts them and some positivity, hopefully.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. We come to you live as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports media space. Spent 5 years a host over at 97.5 The Fanatic on the radio here in Philly. 3 years credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member. And this is my third year as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube. All that stuff really helps us out. We're over 3,000 subscribers now. It gets you new notifications when episodes are posted, and it costs you nothing. It's totally free and easy to do. It takes you like 2 seconds, and it really helps me out. So I'd appreciate it if you did that. If you have not done that yet, today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. If you're looking for a freak out rant about the Philadelphia Phillies stretch that they're on right now and this rough play and how this team is playing as bad as anyone in baseball, not named the Chicago White Sox right now, you may be in the wrong place for this episode. Now, I'm going to be realistic. I swear, I'm going to be realistic. And yesterday's episode, if you want to go check that out, if you need to get it off your chest before you watch this one, I went through a huge rant in the first segment of everything that's going wrong and what's driving me insane. Like, I'm not immune to what's wrong with this Philadelphia Phillies baseball team. I'm not going to pretend like they're playing great baseball right now. I'm not going to lie to you and say, oh, everything's fine. Don't worry about this. No, we're not doing that. But when you go through these stretches of the season, like the Philadelphia Phillies have gone through, losing 5 straight series, getting swept for the first time all year, just playing miserable baseball since the All-Star break and average baseball since really they came back from London, it's time to focus on other teams that have gone through stretches like this year, other teams that have gone through stretches like this recently that have had success. We get so caught up in the day-to-day. Like I just talked with Peter Bukowski, who does Locked On Sports Tonight. You'll see an episode tonight with me on it talking about what's going wrong with the Philadelphia Phillies right now. And he made a great analogy that I'm sure you've heard before, like, well, a great, I guess, statement. Seeing the forest through the trees is a tough thing to do when you're talking every day about this team. And that was something he was talking about with me, having to talk about the team and do the podcast. But also, I know how you work as a fan of the Philadelphia Phillies and of the baseball team in general. 162 games, you may not be watching all 162, but if you're a big-time Phillies fan, you're probably watching a game every day, if not every other day. You're watching games very, very regularly, and we can get lost in a season. So this is a take a deep breath moment and try and get perspective for where the Philadelphia Phillies really are at right now. They're still in great shape in the standings. They are. And I know you don't want to hear that. Like, the team is floundering. They're not playing good baseball. They need to pick it up quickly. This 10-game West Coast road trip is going to be really, really tough for them, especially considering how they're playing right now. At their best, this would be a problem. They're playing at their worst right now. And they're no longer the best team in baseball by record. The Cleveland Guardians have taken over that spot by half a game. The Phillies are 65-43, though. They are still 2.5 games up on the Dodgers for best record in the National League. They are still 6.5 games up on the Braves for best record in the National League East. They're still probably going to win the division, like most likely. And whatever happens, they're not going to collapse bad enough that they miss the postseason. So when we came into this season, this is the first point of perspective. Remember what you're in this season for. Are we in this season to watch the Philadelphia Phillies win 100 regular season games? Are we in this season to watch the Philadelphia Phillies win the most regular season games in franchise history? Are we in this season to watch this team win the NL East? I think the answer to all of those would be, it would be really nice, but that's not the ultimate goal. They've done more than all of those marks the past 2 seasons. Frankly, I think any team would trade a franchise record regular season win total for a National League pennant or a divisional title for a World Series appearance or an NLCS appearance. I mean, there are plenty of division winners that don't even come close to sniffing the World Series, and the Phillies have been on the doorstep or in it the past 2 years. So we know what the benchmark of this season is going to be. Whether they win 90 games and sneak in, well, I don't know that 90 would be sneaking in this year, but whether they win enough games to sneak into the postseason or whether they win 140 games, which they're not going to do, but you're not going to have any type of comfort with this season or a level of, oh, this team accomplished what they set out to accomplish unless they're hoisting that trophy at the end of the World Series. Are they still capable of doing that? Absolutely. Is the regular season just a vehicle to get you to the postseason in as good a standing as possible to set up for a World Series? Absolutely. And have they done that? I mean, not technically done it yet, but they've done enough. By the way, if you see me swat, there's like this weird fly wandering around my face right now. Nothing's going right. Yeah, I can't even do a podcast without a fly right now. Everything's falling apart. Okay, I promised I'd calm down. But bottom line is, remember what the regular season is good for. It's to set you up for postseason success. When everything's said and done, even with this rough stretch the Phillies are in right now, they will have done that. So feel good about that. But I also think we need some external perspective. That was the internal, think about the Phillies a little bit deeper perspective. Let's talk baseball. And let's talk this year, and then we'll go historically. Recent history, too. I'm not going to talk to you about a team in the 1910s that had one of these stretches and then went on to have success in the postseason. No. But let's look at this year. I mean, have the Dodgers had a stretch like this? A similar one earlier on in the season. The Yankees, who just swept you, they had a stretch like this like a month ago. They were unbelievably bad leading up to the All-Star break. They've turned it around. They look really good right now. And that's just the nature of how baseball goes. The whole "this is just baseball" excuse is a lame one unless you've played a lot of baseball, and then you understand there are days where it just doesn't work. You may have good stuff and you can't get a guy out. You may be putting good swings on a baseball and everything's hit right at somebody. And when you slump, sometimes your team slumps. And when your team slumps, you're not going to win very many baseball games. It happens. It's happened to other teams this year. The Yankees have gone through it. The Dodgers have gone through it. The Braves have gone through it. Like all the other really good teams in baseball have had stretches. The O's have had a stretch like that. Not necessarily as bad as the Phillies. And yes, we're getting to the point where, okay, boys, I understand teams have bad stretches, but it's time to pull out of it. Like, yes, am I getting nervous about how long this goes on for? Absolutely. I'd be crazy not to. But to think that this is a vacuum and only the Philadelphia Phillies are experiencing this and no other team has ever gone through a stretch like this that's as talented as this team, you're crazy. It's incorrect. It's factually inaccurate. And it doesn't change the ceiling of this team. And just proof positive is we're going to look at the Rangers of last year. The Rangers last year in the regular season had like a 4-17 stretch. An unbelievably, they played 13 games below 500 in a 21-game stretch. Now, could someone remind me what the Texas Rangers did at the end of last season? Because I believe they hosted themselves a nice little parade down there in the Lone Star State. And I'm not saying, oh, okay, well, teams to win, they have to go through these bad stretches. What I'm saying is, in those stretches, the Texas Rangers, who were trailing the Astros in their division and were fighting for a way to find their way into the postseason and did not have postseason success in the past and were kind of coming out of nowhere as far as a team that could compete for even an American League pennant, let alone a World Series, they were probably losing their minds down there in Texas. And turns out, well, they found their way into the postseason. They got hot at the right time. They beat the brakes off a bunch of teams on the American League side, and then they got an easier opponent on the National League side by the grace of God because the Phillies, I'm not bringing up the NLCS again. Bottom line is there are points in every season for every championship team. Most seasons, like 99% of championship seasons. Every once in a while, there's something. If you're a basketball fan, there's a season like the Boston Celtics had this past year in the NBA where they were wire to wire better than everybody else, and they end up winning and hosting the Larry O'Brien. But most championship seasons, you're going to come to a point of, I don't think this team has it. And that's a natural thing over the course of long sports season. Baseball is really long. I mean, heck, we went through it in a football season here in this city in 2017, 2018, when Carson Wentz, the MVP of the Philadelphia Eagles and probably the NFL, goes down, blows out his knee, and you're like, well, we just lost our quarterback. We're dead in the water. The Eagles won the Super Bowl that year. Strange things happen in championship seasons, and the great teams overcome it. And you know when you find out who great teams are? October. You don't figure out in July. You don't figure out in early August. You figure it out in October. So getting to that point is the whole point of this last 5-6 months stretch, right? Like this regular season, it leads up to a sprint to the finish. And the Philadelphia Phillies have been as good as any team in baseball at that sprint to the finish. So if you think that the Phillies are the only team that's done this, also, there have been bad stretches like this for numerous Phillies teams that have been really good. The 08 team went through a bad stretch. I mean, 1980 team went through a bad stretch. Like the only teams that didn't go through these type of slumps, 93 and 93 just played like 500 ball. Basically, they didn't play 500 ball, but they weren't as good in the second half. They kind of got to the finish and they had built up enough lead and they played consistently enough. They were fine. They didn't go through a bad stretch, but they also didn't go through like an unbelievable beat the brakes off everybody stretch in the second half. Like there have been some great Phillies teams of the past that have dealt with this as well. And 80, you won a World Series, and 08, you won a World Series. Like sometimes you need to take yourself out of the day-to-day of being a fan of this team, and you need to put yourself into the overarching of like, okay, are we experiencing something that other teams have not? Are we experiencing something that the Phillies have not? The answer to both those things are no. And until we hit like historically bad type stuff, I'm going to hold on to that. And I'm not trying to blow sunshine up your rear, but I am trying to give you legitimate historical perspective on what teams have overcome in the past and why the Philadelphia Phillies can absolutely take care of business the rest of the way. But they got to come out of it. And maybe they'll take some changes. I'm not ready to change a lot of things, but coming up next, we're going to discuss a couple things that may have to change with the Philadelphia Phillies when it comes to the way they go about their business, at least until they're out of this slump or maybe for the rest of the regular season and the rest of the year. We'll talk about it coming up as we continue Locked On Phillies. But let's talk about a new sponsor. And this one's near and dear to my heart. Let's talk about Liquid IV. I'm 29 years old. Now, if you're around my age, you'll get this. If you're a little bit older, well, I'll talk to you in a second. But nights get rougher. You know what? At any age, like once you're past the age of like 26, 27, it's rough to go out sometimes and try to wake up in the morning and have stuff to do. You know it's a must, Liquid IV. You pop that stuff in a glass of water or your favorite drink and you go ahead and mix it up. It is like a magic elixir that rehydrates you. It makes you feel better. It's science-backed, and it's a way to hydrate yourself better, whether you're doing it for sports reasons, for healthier reasons than myself, or you just say, oh, I'm having a long day at the beach. I'm going to have some of this to make sure I don't get sunstroke and stay hydrated. And when I'm sweating a bunch, I've got that on lock, so I know my body's going to feel right. To, hey, I'm pretty hungover. I need to survive this next morning. Where's my Liquid IV? I mean, Liquid IV is the absolute best for hydrating your body the way it should. It's basically water on steroids. I mean, I have no other way to say it than it's amazing. It's powered by Live Hydroscience, an optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. And you can get 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. What are you waiting for, folks? Hydrate yourself. This is a perfect matchup. Let's talk Supply House, right? Sometimes you see a perfect tandem of advertisers, and I appreciate Liquid IV, who we just talked about. If you need to hydrate, probably means you're out in the sun a bunch. If you're out in the sun a bunch, probably means you're doing something in the skilled trades. And if you're working in the skilled trades, you need supplies. So what I want you to do is get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. You can shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands. You can get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business, and you get to talk to a real person every time. Isn't that the best? Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge as well by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Listen to what you're going to get. Every trade master gets access to a dedicated phone line. What are you, the president? Might as well be with Supply House. Free shipping and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. So let's discuss some changes, because I'm kind of in the thought process, right? Like, I normally approach the baseball season with as consistent as you can be, the better your long-term success. The way that I see a perfect baseball organization operating, top to bottom, is one, have an owner that cares about winning. Check, the Phillies have that. John Middleton's willing to shell out money and pay for all these players and go ahead and allow his GM and president of baseball operations everything they need to create a great roster. So that's step one. That's the top of the totem pole. And then you move down one, and it's the front office. And you look at guys like Dave Dombrowski and Sam Fuld. And it's on them to build a competitive roster, to go out and use the owner's money wisely, to make signings that make sense, to trade for guys that can help the team. And Dave Dombrowski is a Lock Hall of Fame executive. He's one of the best in the business. He does a great job. He has put together an incredible roster. It's different to say, like, consistency is key when your team stinks, and you can consistently put out a bad baseball team and you're just going to continue to lose. Maybe you'll play a little bit better, but like, you have to have a good roster put together first. And the Philadelphia Phillies have that. I know people like to tweet, like, when Bryce Harper goes 0 for a series or whatever, he went like, oh, he stinks. He doesn't stink. Neither does Trey Turner or JT Realmuto or Nick Castellanos or Kyle Schwarber or Bryson Stott or Alec Boehm or like any of these guys that you've seen had good success at the major league level. Some of them might stink now. Some of them might stink for a season. But Dave Dombrowski's done his job to put a talented roster together. So then what I think the key is for a manager of a baseball team, and this is why I like consistent roles in the bullpen, and this is why I like a set starting rotation rather than doing like an opener or trying to skip a day or putting in an extra guy, unless you really need to get guys rest, and having a lineup that is as consistent as it can possibly be. Because once you have the talent that you've acquired through those first two steps of the organization, it's on the manager to figure out how the team fits best together. And then once you find that, you put your best foot forward, right? If you're a pitcher, right, every once in a while you're going to have to switch things up. But if you have a great pitch, let's say, I don't know, I'm going to go with Zach Wheeler's four-seam fastball. Let's just use that for an example. I know he mixes up his pitches, but if I had that, I would be throwing that 70, 80% of the time. You have to switch stuff up to mess with hitters, but like, you want to go ahead and use your best pitch the most. That's essentially what setting the best lineup is. And the more you can consistently use your best approach, the more you should consistently win. And the tough battle you fight internally as a manager is, well, when do I make changes? When do I mix in the off speed? When do I go with a lineup like Rob Thomson went with yesterday? And part of me understands it. Part of me is annoyed by it, where you see like Garrett Stubbs and you go ahead and see Rojas is out there and Edmundo Sosa is out there, and you're looking at a team that's just doesn't have everything. Like JT didn't play, Trey Turner didn't play, and you really seemed like you needed a win. That can drive you insane. You also have a long West Coast road trip where you have 10 straight games, no off days, a team that's going to be in the postseason, and maybe a team that's mentally battling that you want to get them some time to just sit there and take a day off for some of your big bats that haven't been hitting all that well. I can kind of understand it, but like, you have to know when to switch things up. And this may be a time where Rob Thomson needs to switch things up, not just in the lineup, but in the rotation, in the bullpen. Let's talk about one thing that they could change in each of those spots that could potentially help them come out of it. Here's one thing I would do in the starting lineup. Now, normally you can go out and you could play a defensive player with this lineup that isn't hitting all that well, a la Johan Rojas, and say, well, the other 8 guys are going to produce. We can have one guy that maybe every once in a while runs into a hit and live with their defense. That doesn't feel like a way the Phillies can get away with playing baseball right now. They need to put their best foot forward, and there's been a guy that has been really, really good for them coming off the bench that I think should be playing second base for a little bit. It might not be great for Bryson Stott's confidence, but you know it's not great for the team? Losing all these games. So I would try Edmundo Sosa more consistently at second base. I'm not worried about Trey Turner's recent slump. He's going to come out of it. He's a great hitter. But Bryson Stott has been really rough all year, and his glove is not doing much good when the bats aren't working at all. You can save some runs, but if you're not producing any, that's not going to make too much of a difference. I would look at Edmundo Sosa as a regular player at second base, at least for maybe this West Coast swing. Get him like 5 of 7 games out there and see if that does anything. See if he provides a spark for this lineup. As far as the starting rotation is concerned, there's not much you can do here because Ranger Suarez is still a little bit banged up with the back issues. Taijuan Walker's on the injured list. Spencer Turnbull's on the injured list. I don't know there's much you can change with the starting rotation. What I would try and do if I'm Rob Thomson is I would try and get them out of games a little bit sooner if I can, right? I don't know if it's a tiring, but when you say the dog days of summer, part of that implies that team's a little bit tired and worn out and everything right now. This is where the season turns into a slog and your body might not feel as great as it did a month ago. I know the bullpen hasn't been great either, but you just brought in some new arms that you haven't used as much in this bullpen. I know they've been taxed elsewhere, but you have a little bit more depth in the bullpen than you had over the last week or so while you were trading guys. I'm going to say the bullpen's going to have to wear a little bit more on this West Coast road trip, and maybe getting these starters through 4 or 5. Not only if you get through like 4 or 5, you build confidence rather than putting guys out there for the 6th or the 7th and say, okay, well, they're going to end up end of the rope getting hit by a couple of these dudes. But you also maybe make their bodies feel a little bit better for the next time out. It's a consistent growing towards becoming the team you were before. It's not just going to be a quick snap out of it. And then from the bullpen, I'm going to say it again, set roles would be nice. Now, Carlos Estevez has looked solid. I would like to see him as the closer. I would like to see Jeff Hoffman and Matt Strom split time as the setup guy, depending on how you want to go. Now, it should probably be Strom just because he's a lefty and you're going to get a righty in Estevez in the 9th inning. And then Hoffman gets the 7th inning, and then you kind of work mop-up roles with all the other guys. Like, that's what I would do, more set roles. But I think some changes need to be made, some slight ones. You hear, I'm not saying change everything around in the lineup, change the starting rotation, change the bullpen. I'm saying minor tweaks here and there to continue to try and figure this out. That's the type of stuff that I'm looking that may figure out how the Philadelphia Phillies climb out of this hole. I don't know. There is no great explanation, right? It's baseball is probably the best, most accurate explanation of what's going on right now, but there have to be things you try. And this is the time for Rob Thomson to go away from consistency and into trying to work his way out of this stretch as well by helping his team a little bit. Coming up next, we gave perspective already. We talked about potential changes, but I want to just remind you of who this team is. Like, I want to remind you of who the Philadelphia Phillies are, and we're going to talk about some things from earlier on in the season that I don't think are just gone. We'll talk about it as we wrap up today's episode. Let's talk about GameTime first, though. They're absolutely amazing. GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app, they actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. They got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guaranteed. So GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. It's so easy. I mean, just think about it. You go on last second. Well, prices go down close to the first pitch. Great. You go early, you're still going to get a great deal. You don't get hit with any, like, those late fees don't just pop up on you. They show you all in prices so you can see your seat before you even purchase the tickets, and they guarantee you're getting the best deal. Like, you find a seat in the same row and section, they'll give you 110% of the difference with the GameTime guarantee. Why would you use any other website? Like, they give you everything you need to make sure you're getting the best deal. And it's not just for baseball. No, we've got the Hall of Fame game tonight in the NFL. Football's right around the corner. Football tickets, basketball, hockey when they come back, concerts, comedy, theater. I literally just had one of my buddies text me and say comedian he likes is in town. I'm going to look up tickets on GameTime as soon as I'm done recording this episode. GameTime's the absolute best, and they're even going to give you a deal. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's wrap up with this because I just want you to remind you. I'm just going to talk about some of the big players on the Philadelphia Phillies, and I'm going to remind you who these guys are. I want you to understand who's on this baseball team for everyone who's like, this team stinks. They're dead in the water. They're never going to come out of this. Like, who do you think these players have become? Is Bryce Harper not a lock Hall of Famer, MVP caliber player, one of the best players we've ever seen put on a Philadelphia Phillies uniform? Like, this dude didn't just forget how to play baseball. He's in one of the roughest stretches of his career. It's an anomaly. He's not going to just stink for the rest of his contract. Like, that's insane. It'd be like if you watch Michael Jordan miss 5 of, or well, it'd have to be more than that, but he misses like 7 of 10 shots, and you're like, wow, I could beat that guy one-on-one. That'd be stupid. So was thinking Bryce Harper is not good at baseball anymore. Trey Turner was batting .348 at one point this season. He's going to come out of this. We had this situation last year. He went through a bad stretch. The standing ovation happened. Now, I'm not saying give the Phillies a standing ovation. Like, I'm not going to be that guy. But he's going to come out of it. He's been a great hitter basically his whole career. I said the same thing when he was slumping last year. Turns out it took a little bit longer than we thought, but we were right. JT Realmuto is still one of the best catchers in baseball. Absolutely amazing talent behind the plate. Great defensively. He didn't forget how to throw runners out. You still have a guy that locks down the running game as well as anybody. I don't know. Let's look over at third base. Alec Bohm has been a big-time RBI guy the past 2 seasons now. This is just the player that he is. He's going to go through ups and downs because he's still a young hitter. And consistency can be a question for him over 162. But you think he went 3 months leading Major League Baseball in doubles and RBIs and all this stuff, or rather the National League, because Aaron Judge has been a monster. But doing that and then just forgot? No, he's in a bad stretch. He's not that guy anymore. Bryson Stott is still a great defender at second base. He was a Gold Glove candidate last year. That doesn't just go away, especially for a young player. Ideally, it improves. His bat, we'll see. Let's look around the outfield. I mean, we don't really know Austin Hayes like that, but in center field, Rojas's glove is not going to get any worse. And in right field, Nick Castellanos, he's going to hit a home run every time something bad happens. The dude is who he is. He's consistent. He's unflappable. And Brandon Marsh is kind of the biggest question mark right now, him and Stott, because they're younger players that you've seen flashes but are in really bad holes right now. I don't know, man. When the lights were brightest last year, Brandon Marsh was arguably your best hitter in the postseason. Well, in the NLCS. We'll see what he is. He's playing a minor role on this team. The starting rotation, you got Cy Young candidates in Zach Wheeler, Ed Ranger Suarez. Now, I know Suarez on the injured list, but there still are guys that exist on the roster. Aaron Nola has been a Cy Young candidate in the past. He's unbelievable. Christopher Sanchez has been really consistently good all year. Those are the 4 guys that are going to throw in the postseason. You still have, do you know how many teams would trade spots rotation-wise with the Philadelphia Phillies? Probably every team in baseball outside of 3 or 4. Maybe less than that. They're that good. That hasn't just gone up in smoke. And the bullpen. Matt Strahm was an all-star this year for a reason. Jeff Hoffman was an all-star this year for a reason. Carlos Estevez was an all-star for a reason last year. Ryan Kerkering made it from single A to Major League Baseball last year and pitched in the NLCS for a reason. You've got a bunch of guys that are high-leverage arms in this bullpen that are here because of a track record of success or because of miraculous, burst on the scene success. And while some of those guys, don't pan out over the course of a career, it's rare that you see them just, forget how to pitch. Just this guy was amazing last year. Now he stinks. We have no idea how it happened. You have to be a little bit rational. And I understand. I'm not blaming you for this. It's hard for me. Sports fandom is not a rational thing. When you consume sports the way that we do, right? The way that Philadelphia fans do, but any passionate fan base does, it is hard to think rationally outside the world of sports. But you have to think about examples from life. I don't know. If I went outside and my car turned on every day for 2 years, and then one day the battery doesn't work, and I went and I worked on it and I got it fixed, and I have to fix a couple things, and maybe I have a couple problems with it. As soon as I get that thing running again, I'm not thinking, well, every time I try the key, my car's not going to start. No, I'm probably thinking, yeah, it's probably going to start because I have a lot more track record of saying it's going to. I don't know. It's crazy to assume that people that you've watched play baseball for the past 2 or 3 years or more have just all of a sudden forgot because they've gone through a 3-week stretch where they haven't played well. I'm not telling you the Phillies are fine right now. I am telling you they're still talented, and I'm not telling you when they're going to come out of this stretch because I don't know. Things may have to change slightly. But at the end of the day, do I still have faith in this team to reach their ceiling? I absolutely do. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Tomorrow, we're going to preview a series with the Seattle Mariners, talk about a team that can pitch, and also look at a couple things that the Phillies will have to focus on when they take on the team up there in the Pacific Northwest to start out their West Coast road trip. So we'll get into that in tomorrow's episode and talk about the weekend and everything. Look forward, not back. Hopefully it's a better stretch to look forward to. But thank you for checking us out. Once again, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And please make sure you're rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the YouTube if you could, please. It really helps me out, and it keeps you updated on what we're doing here on Locked On Phillies. All right, folks, I'll talk to you tomorrow.